how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward.
To infinity and beyond.
Some people without brains do an awful lot of talking, don't they?
It's classified.
You talking to me?
I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you.
I can't lie!
Expecto Patronum!
Entertainment X.
You never know what you're going to get.
Hey guys, Clay here. For this episode, I chat with Valerie Accetta on the phone. She's the chair of the Department of Theater at the University of Alabama, and we have some wonderful conversations about the future artists and her main themes of the program down there, among many other things. It's a really wide-ranging conversation that I very much enjoyed, and I hope you do too. So, keep on keeping on. We're back. I'm Clayton Howe, and today with me on the phone is Valerie Accetta. Valerie, thank you for chatting with me today.
I'm happy to talk with you.
You guys had a rehearsal earlier today.
We did.
What are you guys rehearsing?
At the University of Alabama at Birmingham, we are currently producing a world premiere musical. It's so exciting. It's a piece we've actually been working on in the department for 3 years.
No way.
It was, yes, it was conceived by one of my colleagues, Carla Koskinen. She runs our directing program at UAB. And she went to this lecture on campus and heard this true story about a man and said, we need to tell his story. And so we've brought on some collaborators, Tommy Newman, who wrote the off-Broadway musical Band Geeks and Single Girls Guide, Tenured Hill. He is one of our collaborators, and he's worked with a man named Jaime Lozano out of New York, and the two of them have been coming to campus for the last couple of years writing the piece.
Oh, my.
And I'm co-directing it right now, and we're in the middle of rehearsals, so it's an exciting time.
That's so cool. So
I know.
you're the head of musical theater at the University of Alabama at Birmingham.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
How long have you been in that position?
I'm in the middle of I'm finishing up my 6th year here at UAB. It's 5.5.
Do you guys find, I don't want to use the word difficulty, but do you find it interesting picking seasons and shows to perform with the demographic of where you're located in the country? Or is that really not a thing? Did I just kind of make that up?
No. Actually, it's something that we're really committed to doing is providing great performance opportunities for all of our students. And I feel so blessed to be in a department and in an institution that has a very diverse student body. This musical that we're doing right now, the title is called Savage, and it's about a man from the Congo who was brought to the United States in 1904. He was one of the forest people from the Mbuti tribe. They were called pygmies then, which of course is sort of a derogatory term now, but he was brought to the States. They ended up putting him in a cage at the Bronx Zoo in 1907. It's this terrible story, but what's beautiful about UAB is that we have students that can fill out this whole cast and this whole company. So it's wonderful to have a diverse student body and diverse voices in our department. So I love that. It's always tricky choosing a season.
I know. No, I know.
But we're fortunate to have such a great group of students to find the right pieces for. So that's good.
Yeah. Has the enrollment process changed recently? Have you had more people applying for musical theater at the college?
Yeah. So our BSA program is only 4.5 years old. We just had our first class graduate last spring. my first class. And so they graduated last April. Yeah. And so our second graduating class will be finished this year. And every year our audition numbers double, which is wonderful. We're the new kids on the block, and there's buzz about the program now, which is great. It gets more and more competitive every year.
It does.
We don't want a class larger than 16, so we keep the numbers pretty small, which means it just gets competitive. But yeah, the enrollment is up.
It's so crazy because I graduated from SUNY Fredonia in Western New York in 2014. And in those 4 years, from 2010 to 2014, the numbers were just staggering how quickly it was like doubling, and now they do, when I went there, it was like, I was with, I don't know, maybe 50 people, and we auditioned, and that was it. And now it's like, you need to send in a tape and there's preliminary stuff.
We are probably going to start the pre-screen process next year. We hadn't done that yet because, again, we're young and we wanted to give everyone an opportunity, but I think we're looking at that route. It's overwhelming, the number of auditionees we have. It's a good problem.
It is. It's true. Yeah. For the school, it's definitely a good problem. It just definitely seems like that major is trending.
Yeah, it is. And what's great, I think, is families are supporting their children in pursuing either a career in the performing arts or study in the performing arts, which I am so happy about.
Yeah,
that's great.
Well, it's so important. The arts are so important.
Absolutely.
So, big question for you, and I'm sure you have many philosophies. I'm curious, what are you guys focusing on? Are there common themes with the department, the way you run the program, the way you're educating?
Yeah, that's a question we get a lot when we're recruiting. How are we different from other programs? Or,
of course.
There's so many, musical theater programs. I think one of the things that I'm so proud about, and we actually had a guest artist in just yesterday doing a master class with our students, and he mentioned this, that the environment and the culture at UAB it's really beautiful. I think, all of our faculty genuinely love and respect one another. And so I think we encourage our students to do that. And then we end up attracting students that are, genuinely sort of positive and enthusiastic and supportive of one another. So we have this great culture at UAB where it is, as any performing arts is, it's a competitive program. It's challenging. It requires a lot of discipline, but people don't tear each other down. I think we always are trying to lift one another up. There's always so much enthusiasm when their classmates do well, and it's so beautiful. So I think sort of our philosophy is that we want to encourage this collaborative and supportive environment, because when you're studying any art form, you're being asked to be vulnerable and to be open-hearted. Yeah. And so to be in an environment where you feel like someone will catch you if you fall, then you can take big risks and know that you'll be supported in that. And sometimes we mess up and students don't complete an assignment or whatever, and they learn from that. It's like being in a family where we can really challenge each other because we know that there's deep respect and love there. So I think that's something that we do at UAB, that really all of my colleagues, all the faculty, and all of our students really practice that. It's beautiful.
It sounds it. And I'm curious, is that a conscious thing that you're looking for when people are auditioning, on how they take feedback or their general demeanor?
Yeah, actually. And again, as our audition numbers
quadruple.
Yes, quadruple in 4 years. We really do. I mean, it's so interesting. I mean, we have a couple of students, and we're in the middle of the decision-making process for next year. Some students who may not, who come in and who are, unbelievably talented. Yeah. But their personality or the way we interact may not be a great fit with us and with our students, or they come to visit campus and they, it just doesn't jive. Yeah. And then we have students that have tons of potential, but we love them so much that we're like, you're going to thrive here, Yeah. So yeah, that does. It's a huge part of that decision-making process for us, more than I ever thought it was going to be. But we are proud of the culture we have at UAB, and we want to keep fostering that.
Of course. That, it's so funny. Companies are really good at it. For performance companies are really good at finding out, what's what's the what with each person and who's kind or, just putting it on. And it's a common theme of my interviews on the podcast. I was speaking to this girl, Gabrielle Elizabeth, and she's in Beautiful. And she entered the show, last April, and obviously it's been running for a hot minute. And the producers are asking everyone backstage, how is she? Not on stage, but backstage. Because it's, they strive for a healthy spiritual place, because that's that can be overlooked. I mean, we say it's important and then just shit happens, but it's conscious, you know what I mean? But it's like to have that conscious thought of it really just, you can feel it when you enter spaces. It's intangible. So I'm really interested about that. Now I have a curveball question for you. Is there anything that comes to mind, like a biggest lesson learned personally for you with this program in the last 4 years? I'm sure there's many, so we don't know where to begin, but I don't know if there's any.
Many. I think, and what's been interesting is as the program grows and as it's gone through, last year was our first year having all 4 years in the BFA, right? Freshmen through seniors.
Right. Yeah.
And so I'm learning. I'm still in the learning process of trying to handle the work-life balance.
Yeah.
And every year I have to teach more classes as the course as the classes matriculate, and then we have 4 years, and and as these audition numbers double and quadruple, there's more and more sort of responsibility that comes with the job, which again is a great problem, but then it's just finding the balance of being able to turn off when I walk away, which is so hard.
Oh, I imagine.
my students, my students are in my mind and in my heart all the time, and my colleagues and the things we're working on and the productions we're doing and the classes I'm teaching. It's hard to sort of, focus on other things in my world. So I'm trying to find more balance there. That's the big learning lesson, which I don't have any answers for it yet.
Okay, yeah.
But it's what I'm learning right now. How's that?
I know it's fine. It's fine because, and I think that's something that we just don't realize is even if, especially if you're running a program, you have deadlines, and then you have other departments that you have to get things in by and whatnot. And then all of a sudden it's it's January, but you're thinking about May, or it's it's May and you're ready. You're there at the end of August already. It's just the way things are. And then you have to travel. It's just I can only imagine. It's probably a good amount of work. So I don't know why I didn't ask this sooner. Who came up with the idea to start this program? How was this program started 4 years ago?
Well, the department had always kind of wanted to do it. And then they, I'm sure there's a lot of red tape with especially state institutions, and then so
yes,
we had lots of bodies that needed to approve this thing before it got off the ground. So
right.
Our chair, Kelly Allison, who's wonderful, he's a lighting designer by trade, and is now the chair of our department. He's fabulous and so supportive. He really was the one who said, we've been talking about this a long time, let's get this done. So they hired me a year before the degree kind of was officially started. And so when they hired me, they had gotten approval through the university. They hadn't gotten approval from the state system yet when they hired me. So we were in the middle of putting together that whole proposal for the Alabama State Board of Trustees to approve this new degree program. And then we also had to get it sort of the stamp of approval from, we're accredited by NAST, the National Association of Schools of Theater. Yeah. So we had to get that done too. So those were the two sort of big, I wouldn't say hurdles because it obviously went well, but the two big check marks that we had to do before the degree launched. Right. But really it was our chair who shepherded the department through that whole process, and they brought me on to do it, and I feel so lucky.
That's wonderful. No, I always think it's so great. I mean, musical theater, me studying it, so I'm a little biased. I think it's I think it's so important. I just think theater and the arts are just so important for culture. Culture shifts what normalization is. and where and this is stuff that we don't even like. I mean, that statement can tie into like clothing brands and performers and what they wear and what that does to the, you know, the school cafeteria and the way kids treat each other. It's all so connected. And I think it's so important. So I think it's great you guys have started, you know, you started this program. Have you always wanted to educate? Has that always been on your mind?
You know, I fell into it, and no.
Okay, the honesty.
I you know, but I started teaching really young. I mean, not teaching full time, but you know, when I was touring, I'd hit cities and we'd do sort of master classes or workshops. And then I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, and so when I was sort of working professionally, anytime I was home visiting family, I'd go and teach a workshop at Columbus Children's Theater with the Columbus Children's Choir, organizations that I kind of grew up in, and just kind of fell into it. My story's so weird. I started my degree. I love school. I started my degree at the University of Miami in Florida in their BM musical theater program, and I got a tour and I left. I thought I was going to I thought I would be in school for 4 years and graduate and do it the normal way. And so when that didn't happen, it was unexpected. So I didn't finish my undergraduate degree until my mid-20s, mid to late 20s. And by the time I went back to school, I was, you know, I was in the union and had been working professionally, and I knew I didn't want to pursue a BFA program at that point. But what was so great, Otterbein University, which was in my backyard, you know, in Columbus, helped me to create my own degree. So I got a Bachelor of Arts degree in musical theater pedagogy, which, you know, is the study of the subject. And so I think I knew by that point that teaching was something that I really enjoyed. So, and that was something I wanted to pursue. So not right away, but then I guess relatively early. I mean, mid-20s, I knew that that's something that I really loved doing. Yeah. Was
this after some performing? You know, had you like lived in the city, or had you done some performing?
Yes. Yeah. I had been living in New York for a few years. I got I toured with State Fair before that. And I got a show that took me to Athens, Greece, over the millennium. How cool was that?
Yeah.
I know. And that's where I met my ex-husband, and he's still with us. We're no longer together, but he's still in the universe.
Okay.
He's Greek American, so we sort of did the back and forth thing for a while. And when we were thinking about, you know, what that relationship was going to look like, and moving further, getting married and that kind of thing, that's when we sort of decided to come back so I could get my degree, and we moved to Columbus for a couple of years to finish that out. So that was that show in Greece was a big change for me. But yeah, I'd been living in New York for about 3.5 years by the time I decided to go back to school.
Was Greece the first time you had left the country and had experienced other cultures?
No, I had been fortunate when I was a youngster. I toured with our choir to Austria and Hungary, and then I toured in a show to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival back in 1995.
Okay.
when I was a senior in high school. So
okay.
Yeah, I had been abroad before, and I loved it. So like any opportunity, and they're like, "Hey, you want to go to Athens for the millennium?" Yes.
Yeah, of course. Were there standout moments of travel that stick out in your mind where you learned something about the other culture or another culture? Is there anything in particular that comes to mind from your travels?
Oof. Well, I mean, I ended up living in Greece for 7 years. So,
wow.
You know, we got married, and after I finished my degree, we moved to Greece. And so that, you know, living in a foreign country as opposed to visiting or knowing it's a short-term thing is a really different experience. You know, and there were days where it felt like, wow, in order to have this relationship, I had sacrificed my family
Culture.
and my language and my country and,
Yeah.
you know, like,
Yeah.
my career, you know, it was like a lot of things. And so that was a lot of
Mm-hmm.
pressure. But also the things that I do now, I wouldn't be able to do if I hadn't lived abroad.
Why do you say
I think.
that?
And, well, I think my resiliency and my go-get-itness, is there a better word for that?
Works for me. It works for me.
I think all of that comes from, you know, I essentially had to create a career for myself in Athens. There's not a musical theater scene, like, at all. So I ended up meeting people and ended up singing at the U.S. Embassy for events, and then started teaching these like smaller workshops and working with private students, and then ended up getting a job as the head of drama at this British International School and sort of creating a musical theater program there. And without those experiences and without really working, the students I was working with were from all over the world. They spoke multiple languages. They brought such unique perspectives to the work that we're doing. I mean, it kind of transformed me as an artist. So I think all of that helped to, prepare me for the thing I'm doing now, which is cool.
When you say it transformed you as an artist, is that like an opening of the mind, or just realizing that how much more is out there, or just, I don't want to put any words in your mouth. I'm just curious.
No, sure. I think my experience as a theater performer up until that point had been, I don't want to say limited, but it was very much sort of Western musical theater. Period.
The Farmer and the
Rodgers
Cowman should be
I did
friends.
a lot of Rodgers and Hammerstein, which genius. I love it.
Right.
And so to be in a place where the ancient Greek writers were writing, but then culturally having students from all over the globe, opening my mind to what live performance could be, I think. And I don't know, having my students were in Greece were so creative and just brought unique perspectives to their work that, I think, opening my mind to how stories could be told or what, what stories we want to tell even, I think was a big change for me.
Yeah. Okay. And very interesting. It's just so I always encourage anyone who has the means to do it to travel, because you learn quickly, especially as an American, because there is a certain way things are being run here in New York City that is just, it is not like that in the rest of the world. It's different.
Right.
And you have to sit down once in a while.
Yes.
I just think it's so important. So thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
With your performing. So if we can rewind a little bit back to just finishing education, you're going to start professionally auditioning for productions. Whatever that means for you. What was that like? Was there self-talk? Did you know you'd get work? Did you know where you kind of fared in the spectrum of prospective talents? Anything that comes to mind with that?
Sure. I think, to be honest, I was really unprepared.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think I've come to that realization even more recently, seeing my students and the things that I want them to be able to negotiate and handle when they get out into the real world. I was thrown in it so early. I was 18 when I got cast in State Fair. And so then I went on the road for a year and then did some regional stuff and then moved straight to New York at like 20. And so I never had those like business theater classes. I never had an audition technique class. And, I know Jessica Jenick, my best friend in the world, is the one who put you in touch with me. She was the one who in New York had been living there for, a good time before I moved there. And she was the one who put me in touch with the right teachers and the right coaches. And she told me where the audition studios were and what subways to take to get there. And I think I was just so lucky early on that I literally was, I was so green, and I walked in with whatever audition material I had, and was just lucky to get some gigs early on. And then by the time I got to New York and was, auditioning for big things with big people, it was like, I am so unprepared. There's a reason it's called audition technique. It's like a different ball game. And so I had to learn quickly on the job.
And what were you learning? Like, what were the things that stand out that you
Oh
learned?
God, like my material was so bad to begin with.
Okay.
And so just realizing that, I need to find material that speaks to me and that's my heart, and that, that I've worked on with and coached and can make choices on. And finding material was one. Just the mindset of what an audition is, I think, was one. A learning lesson. I still struggle with negotiating contracts and thinking about the things that I need when I'm going into a process or going into something. I still struggle with that. And that kind of thing I was terrible at when I was young. So I'm getting better. But all of that kind of thing I was really unprepared for.
Yeah. What have you learned about negotiating? Or like, what advice would you give to someone who maybe has to do it for themselves?
Yeah. Well, actually, that's an interesting one. I honestly, if you have an agent or a manager or someone who can negotiate for you, that's ideal. That's the most ideal thing. And often, like when you're negotiating for an academic position, you don't really have somebody who can speak for you on your behalf, right?
Right. Right.
So, that can be tricky. Again, I'm still sort of struggling with that, but asking for the things that you need, being an advocate for yourself, and all they can do is say no, and then you can make that decision as to whether it's right for you. I still struggle, and it's interesting. Actually, this is something that came from my time in Greece. My ex-husband owns jewelry stores, and so in the summers when I wasn't teaching, I would work at the stores and sell fine jewelry to tourists. And in Greece, like the negotiating thing that's real. No one pays full price for anything.
Yeah.
Like you give them a price, and that's not the price they're going to pay.
Right.
So what you have to be willing to say no if and walk away. Whether you're the person buying or the person selling. And I think negotiating a contract is similar in that way. You have to be willing to walk away from it. If it doesn't pay what you need it to pay, if it doesn't offer, this creative thing that you need in that job, then you have to be willing to walk away. So, in order to have the upper hand, I think, in the negotiating room.
I agree. I definitely think it's he who cares least wins.
Yes.
It's so true. And it's such an interesting dynamic between like performer and producer, performer and theater, because and I've experienced, and I know other performers have experienced, some techniques or tricks that are just terrible, to make an actor feel bad. Or essentially make them feel like they're overstepping their boundary when they ask for, basic need living situations. Right. And I always wonder, what's the best way to articulate that to performers to, because you want to work, you want to perform, you want to grow your resume, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you also, and you do have to pay your dues. So I think it's this weird balance, but it's also like you can't be, disrespected on a basic human level.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know if there's a way to. I don't know that there's an answer to that, but.
Yeah, that's something I'm still learning.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's a great book about it.
You know what?
I need to find it.
Honestly, or write it.
Yeah. There we go. I am definitely not the expert on that one.
Yeah, right. I know. Yeah. So I had a conversation with Melissa Robinette I don't know if their name rings a bell or not. She's like VP of Equity. And we had a whole
great.
conversation about negotiating because she still represents herself, and her, always ask for more. Was kind of what we came to, because you'll, eventually end up with what you want. Okay, very good. So performing, getting your first job, what did you learn about? And I'm just interested, like the cast dynamics, where you fit in, how to behave, how other people were behaving.
Yeah. I was lucky to get some summer stock work, and summer stock is its own thing. But I think that I learned sort of most about the professional stuff when I booked the State Fair tour. And again, I was a freshman in college when I booked that, and I started rehearsals that summer. And I think, it's interesting. My agent had negotiated my contract at the time, and she had negotiated, and I actually learned a lot on that tour because we were one of the first tours that went out that was not on a production contract for the, an equity production contract. Oh. So they were still trying to figure out what that tier situation was on these tours. And so we had, Carol Swarbrick was the vice president of equity at the time, and she was on tour with us. So she, that was such a great learning. It was my first union show, and I got to learn all about the ins and outs of it because we always had representatives from equity coming out on the road, and then we had a big talk after the show finished about what that was like. And, it was great. I learned so much about the union and how it worked on that one contract. But I do remember, so we flew a lot. We went by air a lot. But then, every once in a while we would take a bus between cities if it was close. And the first bus we took was from rehearsals in Manhattan to, I think we teched at Penn State. And so we took a bus. And the young man who played my brother on tour, both of us had, we sat next to each other on the bus, and we started talking, and he was like, my agent negotiated that I was supposed to have my own seat on the bus. And I was like, me too. And he was like, I'm so embarrassed to ask about that, By the time we got on the bus, we both ended up sitting next to each other, and we're like, yeah, I guess I'm going to get my own seat,
Right.
But then, 6 months, 7 months, 8 months into the run, you're like, I need these 2 chairs.
You do, though. You do.
So, again, as a young artist, saying, this is something that we asked for, and this is something that I can have,
Yeah.
That was a lesson. I don't know. I mean, I think you get tired of people.
It's the truth. That is the truth. You do.
And so finding ways to cope with that is hard, on the road, especially when nothing feels like home, or nothing feels consistent. I don't know. And boy, I'm so old. That was when I was touring. We didn't have cell phones.
Right.
That was a different era.
A different era.
I had a pager.
Yes, you did.
That was how my family got in touch with me. They're like, call us from the hotel.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So that was a different era.
Wow. What was the were there standout? Okay, so like rewinding a little bit further, even to like rehearsal process. Was there, what did you learn about like the top performers that were in the show?
Yeah. Everyone was so prepared, which was great. And that was exciting. I think, I don't know, it was such a big step from anything I had done before, that, I don't think I had been in a rehearsal process that had 4 rooms going at the same time with they were working in choreography in one room, and then the music directors with somebody else in another room, and then we're working a scene in this room. And I didn't know what that had looked like at the time. So it was just a big change for me.
Wow.
And that's how it works. But when you're 19,
right.
it's like, what am I doing?
Oh my my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It was just such a big change. And then, you know, we were filming commercials and, you know, for the show, and yeah, it was a lot. And then they flew me in for a wig fitting. I was doing summer stock in Illinois, and they flew me in for 24 hours on my day off just to do a wig fitting. So like things like that were like, what am I getting myself into?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know what I learned. It just felt like a lot. I think I was like just hanging on by my fingernails for the whole process.
Made it through.
I made it through.
Yes, yes. When did directing start for you? When did you start to step over to the other side of the production table?
So Bill Goldsmith, who's the artistic director at Columbus Children's Theater, he's retiring this year. He's my heart. He cast me in my first show when I was in the 6th grade. It was called Wheels.
Okay.
And then he also gave me my first directing gig, which was A Little House Christmas, based on the Little House on the Prairie stories.
Yeah.
And he, you know, I hadn't directed before. I had staged numbers in workshops, you know, and he was like, I think you'd be good at this. And so I remember I was in Greece for that summer before I came to do that job. And my dear friend, Greg White, who I had toured with and who directs a lot, I was like, what am I going to do? This is my first time directing. And he said, if you are organized and you don't waste people's time and you come in prepared and you're organized, that's 90% of the job. Yeah. Because people will respect you and you'll be a good leader in that way. And so that just sort of calmed me a little bit. And so, you know, I didn't really know what I was doing when I took that first directing gig, but then I went back to college and I took a bunch of directing classes and directed more there. And then, you know, directed kind of ever since, mostly in educational theater. But then when I left Greece for good and came back to the U.S. and went to grad school, then I really started looking at directing as a viable, you know, as along with teaching and education, part of my work.
Yeah. Do you have other productions coming up this summer?
I do. I have a busy next few months. So Savage we're working on right now. Over my spring break, I'm directing a staged reading at the Red Mountain Theater Company here in town. They do a Human Rights New Works Festival every year, so I get to direct this fabulous Ian August play called The Excavation of Mary Anning with an all-female cast, so that's exciting.
Oh, cool.
That's coming up in a few weeks. And then this summer, I'll be directing Matilda, a big one at Weathervane Playhouse.
Yes.
So, yeah, I'm excited.
Wow. And yeah, you've been working there for 4 years?
This will be my fifth
year?
show. This will be my 5th show that I've directed at Weathervane, yeah.
Wow. Busy. Okay. So I'm a little curious on, do you have like a morning routine, evening routines, different habitual things you do daily to keep yourself centered, focused, organized?
Yeah. You know, the first thing I do in the morning after I get up and brush my teeth is work out. So I either go for a run. I have a really small gym in my basement, but it works. You know, I got a treadmill and I've got some weights and I can, you know, I've got a little machine, so I can do weights down in the basement. I wish I could take a yoga class 5 days a week. Right now, because of my schedule at school, I'm able to do it on Friday mornings. So I do yoga, but I'll do sun salutations every day, you know. So that's how I get in my body and in my breath in the morning. I work out first thing. I always have cereal for breakfast. Okay, yeah. The breakfast of champions. Yeah. And then I do vocal warm-ups, which is not ideal, but I always sing in the car on my way to school. I don't perform regularly, but I do sing a couple concerts every year, or anytime I'm back in Columbus, there's a church that hires me to sing. So I like to keep my voice up, and I teach class voice, and I teach musical theater performance class. So I like to warm up vocally in the car on my way to school. It's not ideal, but that's when I've got the time to do it.
Yeah.
And then what is my routine after that? It depends on the semester. This semester, because I'm directing, I'm on campus every day from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. And I always make sure I take a walk before I come back for rehearsal. Usually it's to move my car from the far parking lot to the close parking lot.
Oh, okay.
Because parking on campus is pretty crappy.
Yeah.
But at least it gets me away from my desk, and I can go for a nice brisk walk and then come back and get ready for rehearsal. The semesters where I'm directing are really busy. So, but in the fall, when I'm not directing a show, I will come home, and I have an 11-year-old stepson that we have every other week. So that changes our schedule a lot, and he has to get up really early to go to school. So that changes those days a little bit.
Yeah.
But
wow.
Yeah, my morning workout routine is really where I feel centered.
Do you have most gifted books, or books you've read frequently or love?
Yeah, there's a book that I read this last summer that I just keep telling people. It's Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson.
Okay.
He is the creator of the Equal Justice Initiative, and the book was mentioned in Time Magazine last year, and I picked it up and was reading it, not realizing that so many of the stories in that book, the sort of story that takes you through the whole piece and then incidental stories, are about people here in Alabama and the prison system here in Alabama. He is also the man behind the Equal Justice Initiative, is behind the Legacy Museum and the Lynching Memorial in Montgomery, which just opened last April. As part of this new musical that we're doing at UAB, on Martin Luther King Day, I took a whole bunch of the cast down to Montgomery to see that memorial and to go to the museum. And it's so powerful, and his writing is so powerful, and it makes you want to do something for the world. So that's a beautiful book. A book that's been in my life a long time is The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. I keep going back to that. I was sort of introduced to it in high school, and that's one that I always go back to. It's just such beautiful poetry. I love that book. I
have yet to read The Prophet. I've heard great things about it, though.
It's beautiful. It really is beautiful, and it's a small book, and the chapters are small. So if you just want a brief thought about love, or a brief thought about, I'm trying to remember some of the other chapter titles. There's one on marriage. There's one on friendships. There's one on children. So yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, I definitely have to read that. You're like the fifth person now that's mentioned this book, and I have to read it. Do you have maybe a common piece of incorrect advice that you hear frequently in regards to, the field of performing or theater or life?
Incorrect advice. Ooh. I don't know if it's incorrect, but an idea that I still struggle with, because it is a part of the business, because we are in a visual medium, but I also hate it, is this idea of type.
Yeah.
I love individuals, and I like to hear individual stories, and I want all of my students to be celebrated regardless of their race or their gender identity or their weight or whatever, like I hate that, but I also recognize that we're in a visual medium, and the story that needs to be told has to be told in a particular way. So I struggle with that. And we have this discussion about type in class, and what does that mean? And why does that word keep circulating, and I get it, as a director, I know if you're telling a story that is, a story about race, then are you bound to tell it in a way that's authentic, or can you change perception? So I think that's a tricky one.
Agreed. Definitely agreed. Yeah, yeah. I'm trying to think of something to add to that. And it's more along the lines of just like, it is changing, but it needs to continue to change with more of the individuals, not so much like ingenue or leading man. What is a leading man? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, it doesn't have to be tall, white,
Right.
That's
right.
not what, and that's not the case as, more recently, which is incredible.
I know. I love it.
It's definitely the individuals. Do you have advice that you would give to a smart, driven college student?
You're never going to be perfect.
Yeah. Let's just get that out there.
So let's try not to pursue perfection. I think, it's advice that I needed to hear when I was in college. It's advice I need to hear now, and it's advice that I try and instill in my students, because I see them. So many of these kids that come into musical theater programs, they have ACT scores that are off the charts, and they do really well in school, and so they're working on a performance piece, and they're like, what is the grading criteria? What do I need to be hitting in order to get an A in this class?
Oh, no.
Well, and the thing is, I remember being that way in school, where it was like, I got an A- in voice and speech. Like, how did that happen? Where did the minus come from? Like, I was so mad about it. And it's like, who cares?
Yeah.
And we talked about this in class the other day. Like, my students, they get anxious about performance days. And it's like, I wish I didn't have to grade you. I wish that we could literally just enjoy the process and keep growing and not worry about what the markers are, Yeah. But we're in a system that requires that at the end of the semester, I give you a letter, So if we can avoid pursuing perfection, then that's what the advice that I would give. I don't know how to go about doing that.
No, it's funny you say that, because it must have been yesterday or 2 days ago. I had literally just read in a book that good enough is not an excuse. Put good enough out and then make it better. Don't hold on to whatever you're doing until you think it's perfect. If it's actually serving someone, or if it's actually coming from a genuine place inside of your body, good enough is great, and then make it better. But don't hold on to
I
it.
love that.
I think that's just so funny that you just said that. So this is great. Okay, so as we wrap up here, I'm curious, as a part 2 to that smart-driven college student question, what are your views or input, thoughts, good, bad, or otherwise, on relationships in professional in the industry?
Professional relationships and how to work with others, sort of collaboration.
Yeah.
Is that, yeah?
Yeah, exactly.
So something I've been so interested in lately and reading more about is empathy, and how empathy works in the brain, and how, I'm interested in it as a theater artist and storyteller, how telling stories helps to bring about more empathy in listeners, of course. Yeah. But I think that we then need to practice empathetic response in the world and with other people. And for me, I think collaboration comes comes about with empathy. Whether, and if somebody snaps one day at rehearsal, or is stressed out or snaps, right? I think about what maybe is going on in their world, and why that was a response. Is there anything we can be doing on our end to help facilitate the things that they need in order for this to be a better collaboration? And I think I'm getting more and more interested about this because I see so much of the things my students are going through these days, in terms of anxiety and depression and self-doubt and, struggling with identity, and it's a lot.
Yeah.
And of course, in college is where a lot of those questions sort of come to the fore. And so I try, I like to think about going into the world practicing empathy. I still struggle with that sometimes, because I also have high expectations of my students and of my colleagues and of myself, certainly.
Right.
Self-empathy.
What's
when
that?
you snap at rehearsal.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, I realized I did not have a big enough lunch and I'm starving. So I snapped because I'm hungry. How can I avoid doing that next time?
Yeah,
and
right.
you know what? It's okay that I snapped in that moment. I will apologize, and we will all work from a new place of openness and open-heartedness. So I think empathy is the place that I've been approaching collaboration from. Yeah,
that's a really great thing to focus on, because that is like, that stuff that comes out. Particularly in college, when you're going through that such a growth period in your life. But even like something that is as trivial as like Tech Week.
Oh my gosh,
people
right.
snap left and right. And if you can have that moment of, okay, their reaction to me is not me.
Right.
If I wasn't actively being vicious to them, then their reaction has nothing to do with what I said. And then that can remove the emotional response, or not even response, but emotional reaction that you have, and then you can respond. And I think that's so smart, especially coupling it with like yoga and mindfulness and being just quite simply present, which we aren't necessarily.
Right.
That's just it just changes it changes everything. And it's a shame when there's someone so talented that isn't in tune with that,
I know.
Because then you realize,
I know.
You think someone's mean, and then you're like, oh, they don't even know any better. That's just how they. Well, we can't work with that.
Right. And in those cases, and I'm starting, this is where I start to struggle when I collaborate with people or with students that have that really tough exterior, that where it feels like, wow, that they're hard to work with, if we use that phrase.
Yeah.
Those are the ones where I like. That's when it's hard to have empathy for people.
Yeah.
And then I try and remind myself that, okay, this outer shell is a shell that's covering something else that is difficult, that
is soft.
I have to remember that,
Yeah. The shell is covering something that's actually vulnerable and soft.
Right.
And it's not
right. And so that shell is protecting that thing, and we have to empathize with that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. I love it. I didn't think we would go towards empathy in this conversation. Not that I didn't think we would. It's just I love the path that it's taking.
Oh, good.
Thank you. Thank you for taking this time to chat with me. This is really...
I've enjoyed it. This is great.
It's enlightening, and I know the people listening are going to learn something new, which
Yay!
I know I did, so at least 10 other people are going to, right? That's the average. But as we wrap up, I'm curious if there is a word or a phrase that you'd put on a billboard for millions of people to see. Does anything come to mind?
It's interesting that we got to this empathy track. I think it would be along the lines of, practice empathy. I think if we all in the world did that, could you imagine?
All the things. We wouldn't have news.
Oh my gosh. It'd be amazing.
I know it would
It'd be a beautiful place.
It changes. It would change your day. It would change your life.
It would.
Oh,
it would.
This is incredible. Valerie, thank you for chatting with me.
Oh, thank you. I enjoyed it. This is awesome.
This has really been a wonderful conversation. Is there anything else that you want to put out there, add for anyone listening?
I don't know. I feel like we covered a lot. I want to thank you for asking such good, deep, important questions, and for sharing this with the world, and for putting this out there. So thank you.
Well, thank you for saying that. I know there's just so much information today that people can see instantly on their little piece of glass. And it's just, I think it's imperative to put out, dare I say, content that is actually educational. At the end of it, there is actually something. It's almost like you've just read a book,
Yeah.
There's something that was learned and that would improve your life and maybe get you being anyone listening, or even you too, Valerie, closer to what you want, closer to your goals, closer to, because we all have these goals of like, I want more money, or I want to be healthy, or I want a good relationship, and it's like, is that what you want? Or do you want freedom? Do you want to positively influence other people? Like, what is behind what you want? And these core conversations that you and I are having with these like core topics of life, I think can cut through the BS and help you get there quicker, because life is short.
Life is short.
Anyway, we're not ending on life is short, but I really appreciate it. I love this practice empathy. I couldn't agree with you anymore. So thank you, Valerie.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Valerie Accetta.
You've been listening to Entertainment X, the podcast. You can follow Entertainment X on Instagram at _EntertainmentX_. If you haven't yet, go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join Clay next week for another curiosity conversation on Entertainment X. Thank you for listening.